Hello everyone, thank you very much for having me today with you in the Net Zero International Conference at the American University in Cairo. It's a great pleasure to present to you the how to build resilience for the future using the power of net zero, and our focus is going to be on the MENA region. My name is Amr Seleem. I'm a climate resilience advisor at the Eco Hubs, which is one to go shop for energy and climate innovations. It's based in Masdar City in Abu Dhabi. Our agenda for today is very intense. We need to understand first the challenges that it's facing on the regional level across the MENA countries. Also, what kind of opportunities that are in there to achieve net zero. We are going to also share a couple of successful initiatives, which countries that adopted the net zero targets, how far they are, etc. And importantly, what it's required to implement and achieve net zero. Definitely, when we mention this, we always talk about the means of implementation, which means the technology and finance and capacity building. And then we end up today by a couple of takeaways that you may take with you afterwards. And before we kick off, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Salah Haggar for his hospitality and shaping this conference to make it a reality. It's very critical to understand the net zero, the power of net zero as a kind of climate action, giving the opportunity also for different stakeholders to come together to think and brainstorm about the solutions, share knowledge, fill in the gap in the market. When you look at the agenda, it's really well designed and well shaped. So congratulations, Dr. Haggar, on this success. And also, I wanted to thank you very much on the personal level for impacting my life, influencing my future. I have been one of your students almost 13, 15 years ago. You really influenced and shaped, I think, many people who are attending as well. I can name a couple of people I knew that they are attending this conference. So thank you very much for your dedication and moral support that you provide us inside and outside the classes. And being really connected to you, it's always something that significantly impacting our lives. Same here when we also on the Eco Hubs, we're thinking to move or expand within the region. Why we chose actually Abu Dhabi as a home or a host for us, because we have been always welcomed, and what we found there, the unique philosophy that they adopted, and this is coming of course from the strong leadership that has been provided always by the leaders of Emirates. On top of them, the Sheikh Zayed, when he mentioned future generations, this saying, future generations will be living in a world that is very different from that to which we are accustomed. It's essential that we prepare ourselves and our children for that new world. And prepare here means building resilience, reducing emissions, reaching our climate goals, trying to provide what we have been inherited from our ancestors to deliver it for the younger generations. They deserve that. This is our mission right now, to work on delivering and maintaining a sustainable future life. So right now we're going to provide an overview about the MENA region profile and the importance why we need to build resilience in this particular region. The MENA is a home of 22 countries representing 5% of the global greenhouse gas emissions in 2021, and almost the average number of population within the MENA region is like 0.4 billion people. 4 countries in the MENA region adopted the net zero targets by 2060, including Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, and most probably Tunisia. The region is very important for the global energy markets because the oil and gas resources that they have, and it plays a key role in meeting the global energy demand. But also the MENA is unique for having the same almost set of challenges that every country in this region is facing, including the heat waves, extreme temperature, water scarcity, and their vulnerabilities to the climate change impacts. Why actually we need to build resilience? This is basically to address the climate impacts because the area is very vulnerable to the rising temperatures, the water scarcity, also the increased frequency of extreme weather events. We have seen in the past couple of years in almost every country several storms taking place, heat waves that is hitting all of the countries. And right now it's pretty crucial and important to protect the communities, especially the local communities, and enhancing the ecosystems to withstand the extreme weather events. And this is going to take place by adopting the sustainable practices and trying to transition to the net zero emission. First of all, it's required to adopt the net zero emissions strategy. Um, Adopting this strategy actually presents an economic opportunities, including job creation. If we are talking about renewables deployment, this is of course entails lots of technological advancement, innovations. Also, it provides job and employment opportunities for the people in this area. This region in general has been massively dependent on the fossil fuel, but right now, by adopting the net zero strategy, they are going to provide a completely different scheme to enhance the social aspect and the economic opportunities in the region. So here we would like to explain the definition of climate resilience. As per the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they define the climate resilience as a capacity of social, economic, and environmental systems to cope with a hazardous event or trend or disturbance, responding or recognizing in ways that maintain their essential function, identity, and structure, while also maintaining the capacity for adaptation, learning, and transformation. As we see from this graph on the right side, there are main four phases: the plan, absorb, recover, and adapt. If we take an example of anything that happens, let's say there was an extreme weather event, including a cyclone or a storm that happened and it broke, for example, one of the power stations, hydropower. What could happen that we should have considered planning for such event that it might take place. So we should be conducting a climate assessment or climate risk. And then definitely we have to be agile to work on that. And then we need to recover as fast as possible and then adapt for the future to avoid what's going to happen. This is the meaning of building climate resilience. Doing the business as usual is not going to be the norm anymore. Building the stations, even for renewables and solar power, when we build it for now, we should consider the future aspect. This is the meaning of resilience. You always have to think of the future aspect. When many people asking me really what is the definition of the climate resilience, because if you go right now on the internet and look up the definitions, you will find 100 plus, by the way, and it's even based on the sector level. If you consider like energy resilience is different from nature resilience, is different from health resilience. Every sector has its own definition, but this is a very generic one. And for the simpler one, even I would call it, it's mitigation speaks adaptation, adaptation speaks mitigation. It's integrative approach, and this is how we build resilience. As we were just talking about the challenges that they are facing the MENA region, we can classify them into three main categories. The extreme weather events, especially rising sea levels and coastal erosion, it might cause threats and loss of the lands, impacting the health of the people who are living in the coastal areas. Also, the increased frequency and intensity of heat waves. This is impact the human health, impact the employment situations, impact the food security, the crops and the cultivation. All of that have been threatened by the climate change. Same goes also for the third main point that it's almost facing every single country in the MENA region is the water scarcity and desertifications causing and leading to droughts and adversely impacting the food production and, of course, food security. But there are some sort of key challenges specifically touching or limiting the achievement of net zero and to be adopted. By the way, for the MENA region, there are only 4 countries who already adopted the net zero, as we just mentioned. It was Bahrain, Oman, and Saudi Arabia and the UAE, Emirates. But for the long-term strategy, which is very critical to announce or to mention here, is Tunisia and Morocco, who are the only 2 countries that they adopted long-term strategy for the low emission. So the key challenges are like the first one is energy demand and consumption patterns. This is, of course, covers the part of the volatility and fluctuation of the oil and gas prices, and also the growth of the population in the region. Like if we see the pattern of the growth of the population, we will find that it's increasingly exponentially, and this of course affects the reaching the net zero emissions, and also reliance and dependence on the fossil fuel in the region. This is also impacting achieving net zero. The second part is the water scarcity and management. As we all know, this area is challenged by water availability, and that requires other technologies including desalination, and we all know that desalination consumes huge amount of energy. So we need to adopt the practices and the sustainable measures to ensure the desalination and other technologies are energy efficient, so we can reduce of course the emissions, and meanwhile help reach the net zero targets. Economic diversification. The first point here is always coming the dependence on fossil fuel. This is of course going to hinder and limit the net zero targets. This is going to impact the job situation. In order to achieve economic diversification, we need to get rid of the dependence on fossil fuel, adopt renewable deployments, and in that sense it's going to provide other job market for the people, and meanwhile enhance and impact other many sectors that could be connected and linked to the renewables deployment. Last but not least, and the most important part here, is the policy and regulatory frameworks, and this is really critical because when the country is taking a net zero target, this is really important. The means like the signal their commitment and their accountability to reach this target, and this is of course definitely is going to be reflected across all of the stakeholders of the country. They are going to have a collective climate action to achieve and reach these goals, and also this is going to be translated into a long-term strategy, and we just mentioned it's only 2 countries in the region who adopted only these 2 strategies, Morocco and Tunisia. So as we just mentioned, and we talked about the challenges that it's facing the MENA for achieving net zero. Right now we're going to discuss the opportunities, and it's basically about turning anything has been challenged to opportunity right now. We're going to discuss main 5 points about how to achieve net zero for the MENA region. The first one is the renewables deployment in the region to support the energy transition and achieve net zero. Given the abundance resources of renewables, including solar, wind, the areas also that we can deploy big and mega projects like concentrated solar power and PVs in the region. These opportunities, it's very good to be considered to achieve the net zero. Second point is when we think about sustainable infrastructure development in the region, given the urban planning, smart cities, and this entails lots of technologies like smart meters and grid automation. This is very useful for grid integration. Same for also the efficient insulation while the renewables deployment. Also the green building. I know this is a conference is most probably is much focused on the green building. This is the area I think of also Dr. Hagar and many other of the participants. What's also very good to consider is the implementation of energy efficiency measure. This is the third point, to promote the use of energy efficiency and the energy audits, retrofits, etc. By the way, as you know, the UNFCCC Secretariat conducted over the past 20 years for 4 phases, something is called technology needs assessments, TNAs. And these TNAs, when the asked 90 countries to participate, these 90 countries coming out of the developing countries, they prioritized for the mitigation the top 2 sectors. All of the countries, they prioritized their needs, their technology needs. It was the first sector was the energy, and second one was the agriculture. So to let you know that the energy is the most prioritized sector for mitigation for all of the countries, especially from the technology needs. So moving to the fourth point and the fifth point, the fourth opportunity for achieving net zero is the circular economy and promoting recycling and waste to energy projects. Same also for minimizing the waste generation and landfill use. The last one, which is also very important to consider, is the sustainable transportation solutions, shifting towards the electric vehicles and public transportation and infrastructure also for alternative fuels. I would like to emphasize on the electric vehicles, we have to consider also the decarbonization. It doesn't make any sense if you just have right now electric vehicles and also you plug in it in a power plant in that the power is supplied by coal or by gasoline. I know many people argue that the efficiency of electric vehicles is way better than the efficiency of internal combustion engines. That's correct. But on the other hand, you need to completely ensure the decarbonization of the entire cycle, and this is the meaning of reaching a net zero by the end of the day. Moving to the to showcase or share a couple of successful initiatives and how do we actually uh, showcase the achieving the net zero. The key drivers actually for the energy transition and achieving net zero is switching to zero carbon technologies. This is something important. We have to consider that right now, every time from now then to mitigate climate change. Second point is to promote and accelerate the deployment of the carbon capture and storage technologies. Third point is the establishment of carbon markets and the use of carbon offsets. As you are familiar with the Article 6.2, 6.4, this is for the carbon mechanism within the countries. This is delegated for 6.2. The article, I mean Article 6, it's a part of the Paris Agreement. So if you went for Paris Agreement and the text and you will read about the Article 6, this is the carbon mechanism between countries. This 6.2 and 6.4 is for the voluntary carbon markets. And then the fourth point, which is like the sustainability sustainable finance availability. This is, you cannot achieve any of these points without ensuring the availability of the finance to drive actually the all of the technologies and foster the deployment of these technologies. Now is the time to share with you a couple of the initiatives that has been taken on the MENA region. We only said that there are 4 countries that adopted the net zero targets. We start with the UAE. They already adopted the Energy Strategy 2050, which aims to increase the clean energy contribution to the energy mix by 50% by 2050 and reduce the carbon footprint by 70%. And in their second NDC, they already increased even to 23.5 the economic emission reduction by 2030. And this is another. This is, by the way, is very identical with the EU. The EU Green Deal that they have done, they have declared in the COP25 in Glasgow. Sorry, COP25 in Madrid. When they mentioned that they are going to the entire EU to achieve net zero by 2050, and then they took another more rigid commitment to achieve 55% of carbon reductions by 55 by 2030. So here is also Emirates took similar target like the EU. And then also, of course, they decided to achieve net zero by 2050. Moving right now to Saudi Arabia, also they adopted, this is the second country in the MENA region that adopted net zero by 2060. The third one was Oman and Bahrain. Both also they adopted net zero by 2060. Egypt, we know that they adopted the National Climate Strategy 2050, and one of the highlights there is to achieve 42% of renewables deployment by 2035. Let's move to the next one. What's the two technologies that we talked about that could be critical in driving the net zero? The green hydrogen and the carbon capture and storage. Both needs to be deployed, to be accelerated in order to deploy. And they have two, the two technologies, they have a huge potential within the region. I can show you a couple of facts why it's very important. For example, the growing interest in CO2-free hydrogen production in the MENA. Also, the MENA, especially Emirates and Saudi Arabia, they want to be the Middle East, the leader in the green hydrogen market. And also, we have seen lots of investments right now, like the 300 billion USD dollars in the hydrogen market by 2050. Same for carbon capture and storage. We know that these areas, especially the Gulf countries, have been a home of fossil fuel production, and this is one of the really good areas where you can naturally store the CO2 under the ground again in the same way that you produce. So there's a huge potential for that, where you are actually producing the fossil fuel. You can also digest the capture the carbon and digest it again in one of the technologies. As we see here, one of my favorite quotes for the climate technology is from Bill Gates, when he mentioned the climate tech is not just an industry, it's a solution to the biggest challenge facing our planet. It's a way to turn the tide on climate change and create a more sustainable future for all. By using the clean technologies and the climate technologies, we are going to put on the tracks. This is one of the priorities, by the way, for the Emirates and COP28. COP28 is relying massively on the strong leadership, first, second on the partnerships and collaborations, and third on the means of implementations, including the climate technologies. This is the role, how we're going to mitigate, how we're going to adapt and build resilience. So moving to the role of technology and finance, after we discussed the opportunities to achieve net zero, here comes the means of implementation in terms of technology and finance and capacity building. Here we are going to discuss main 5 points. The first one is the role of technology within the renewables and deployment. First of all, it's the role of technology, especially for the VRE, for the variable renewable energy generation. This is highly required. Same for also digitalization, which across the smart grids, grid management and optimization. And then the second main point is the role of finance and financial institutions to support the renewables deployment and in general clean energy projects. They provide the capacity building. They provide or they partner with the governments and the project developers to unlock investments to deploy mega projects, especially for to help energy transition. And then we move to the third point, the attracting private sector investment. This is really critical to include the private sector within the mega projects and deployments of the renewables. As we have already mentioned, the energy transition is the most critical part to achieve net zero. You will find different ways how to achieve to engage the private sector within this strategy, within the implementation as well, and this definitely consequently creates jobs, enhances the economic growth of the economy. The last point here at the moment is the role of international organizations to provide the technical and financial support, and most importantly, building the capacities in the countries and also in the institutions. We need to move also for the last point, which is about the partnerships and collaborations. This is really critical building partnerships across the different stakeholders. This is one of the priorities for the COP28. COP28, we know when they started to identify their priorities for this year, what they require. First, that they identified the leadership, their strong leadership to build and or to catalyze the climate action across the globe. Also, second point was partnerships and cooperations among all of the stakeholders, including the parties and non-party stakeholders, including the civil society, private sector, youth, academia. So here it's really, really critical. And by fostering cooperation and engagement among all of the different stakeholders, this can definitely elevate the transition to net zero emissions. I would like to share with you another couple of potential events in the lead up to COP28. The first one is the MENA Regional Climate Week, which will take place from 9th to 12th October 2023 in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And this is second edition, and there is another three regional climate weeks also are taking place, one in Africa as well in September. For more information, you can check the UNFC website for these dates and how to sign up. There will be a call for expression of interest, I think, in the next 2 weeks. And then people, of course, institutions, organizations can apply and express interest. So at the end, they can attend also this. Right now, the region is under ongoing momentum, and these such conferences and for matchmaking, for brainstorming together, it's really useful to build understanding and help driving climate action across the region. Once we reached here, I just want to share with you a couple of key takeaways that you may leave with. The Middle East faces a period of intense change in response to global demand, contraction for oil and gas, and climate commitments. They are facing lots of challenges, but also some of the countries have already adopted the net zero by 2060, including UAE and Saudi Arabia. But still they are massively dependent on the oil and gas, and they are trying right now by the use of technology to seek solutions how to achieve their commitments, how they could diversify their economic situation and find a way to achieve what they have promised. This is means the leadership and accountability. The second point is the renewables. Whenever we mention energy transition, net zero, the first thing comes to everyone's mind, I would say it's renewable energy, renewables deployment, energy efficiency. But let's be frank here and admit that the solar PVs, even if they are dominating the deployments of renewables, I would say it's a short-term strategy for emissions reduction. We need to consider a holistic and strategic perspective when we deploy renewables, because there are different ways of to deploy or to shape the renewables deployment. The second point that would like to emphasize is the net zero targets remain ambitious in the region because of the massive dependence on the hydrocarbon combustion about the fossil fuel and oil and gas. The fourth key point is that there are other technologies that should be mainstreamed in the region, including green hydrogen and carbon capture and storage initiatives that offer potential for achieving emission reduction targets. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to share the symbol of resilience in the MENA region. I would copy it from the Emirati ecosystem. It's the Gulf tree. It's well known that it's always resistance against the extreme weather events, against the harsh conditions. This is the real definition of resilience. If you remember again, and we recall the definition of the climate resilience, which is to plan, to prepare, to adapt for the future while maintaining the aspects. I think the function of the tree is definitely to capture the CO2, provide the social ecosystem. There is a shadow, all the maintaining the functional and the necessity functionality of the tree. It's still there despite what's happening within the extreme weather events. I wish we could adopt the philosophy of the Gulf tree across all of our works to achieve net zero target that all of the countries are taking. Thank you very much. With this, I finish. At the end, thank you very much for your attention and for listening. If you wish to know more or if you have queries and clarifications, please reach out to us over email, and we're happy to address your queries and definitely build a strong partnership and cooperation with your entity organization. Thank you very much again, and I wish you a nice rest of the conference.